I would like to thank Varun one more time for his great presentation, and go to the next one. The last presentation of this workshop by Burt Mayer is going to be talking about market demand and value creation from the digital transformation of the built environment. So, Burt, all yours.
Thank you very much, Kostas. So a real pleasure for me to be chatting with you today. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I was both humbled to be asked to speak with you and close out this workshop that's been very informative for me, certainly. And then after my feeling humbled, I felt a little terrified, because you'll notice that I am not a researcher. I'm not a data scientist. I have the opportunity to work with very talented data scientists like Varun, who you just heard from. But my role is as a product manager. My background is in strategy and marketing, both on the technology operator side as well as on the consulting side, all around electric grid technologies, and now more on the behind the meter side, energy efficiency and sustainability. I've been at C3 for 3 years, helping to design and build our application products, which implement a variety of different machine learning use cases for building managers and energy teams that I'll be speaking with to you today. But I'm not in a position to provide any research that would be of great interest to this group. And so I sort of racked my brain about what can I provide that might be helpful or valuable to this team, or an interesting, informative perspective. And I hope that what I can share that will potentially be of use in terms of guiding direction of research is my experience over the last nearly a decade, speaking with energy and facilities teams at large businesses who are looking to implement machine learning use cases, who are interested to either begin their journey, digital transformation in the built environment, or to accelerate it and mature along that path. So my objective for this talk today is to share with you the state of the discussions that I'm having across industries with energy and facilities teams of varying maturities, where they're at, what they're looking to accomplish, so sort of the direction that we're being pulled and that I'm being pulled as a product leader, the things that our customers are most excited about, so kind of where the market is at today, the challenges that our customers are facing and that we hear about in the market, the barriers to them actually implementing these types of solutions, which can be both technology barriers and other organizational barriers and business barriers. And then lastly, I've pulled in some data. So it's not just my qualitative experience, but I can share with you where the market is at today. And so what types of technologies within digital transformation for the built environment are commanding the greatest market influence, and where the market is headed, the sort of trends. And then lastly, some of the learnings we've had through our engagements with a variety of customers across segments, and what that could potentially mean for the audience of this call. So a warning that my content will look a little different than likely the content from most of the other talks in this workshop. It'll be much more sort of a qualitative and my experience and where I see things. And certainly less at a much higher level and a bit more strategic. I hope that is still of value. My perspective at C3 comes from being the lead product manager of this application that we provide called C3AI Energy Management. So it's actually the first application that C3AI built when it was founded a decade ago. The C in C3 was originally carbon, although obviously the company now focuses on many other things. This solution is essentially a layer that sits on top of building management systems, as well as any other sensoring or smart meters which have been deployed across an enterprise, utility bills as well, and then any other data sources that may be available which can be different depending on the industry. Sometimes it's occupancy sensors and building schedules. In other cases, say in a manufacturing context, it's much more around industrial control systems and enterprise resource planning or ERP systems. Essentially, we provide a data model and data unification framework. This is the C3 AI suite, which you may have heard of, that allows us to perform analytics on a unified data set. And the application, C3 AI Energy Management, provides a number of visualizations and workflows around project management and goal setting and tracking, and some machine learning as well, focused on, for example, forecasting and anomaly detection, peak prediction, HVAC set point optimization, as you heard from Varun in his talk. Had the opportunity to work with him on that at Ohio State University. I think probably none of the machine learning would be terribly, or very little of the machine learning would be cutting edge for this group. I think what'll be more interesting is sort of the on the ground experience that we're having. And this application is being deployed at both private companies as well as public institutions and power utilities. So we have a broad variety of perspectives that we've gained through deploying a sort of analytics layer on top of existing data sources for the purpose of energy efficiency and resiliency and sustainability. So that's an overview of the perspective that I come from, being the designer and developer of this solution and working with sales and marketing and customers to implement and see value out of it. The first thing that is notable for me, having worked in this space with C3 now for 3 years, is that very rapidly the energy and facilities teams that I chat with, and oftentimes I have a first call with them. They reach out and they say, we want to hear about what's available to us from industry in around energy management or building energy systems and advanced analytics use cases. And it used 3 years ago, the conversation was much more introduction and trying to convince them that there's value here. It's been really interesting for me to see over the past 3 years of having these discussions, the less and less do I need to sell the concept of digital transformation of the built environment. So, folks are bought in, and I have a few hypotheses for why this is, but you'll see here a few data points from an IBM study as well as an Omdia, an analyst agency, their study. You see over 3/4 of chief operating officers, report that, they recognize that increasing automation, data-driven automation in managing their facilities is going to be important, will have a positive impact. A greater percentage of that believe, AI is going to be necessary as a part of their building management. Folks are no longer, sort of putting us in the hot seat and asking us to justify why we're advocating for advanced analytics and machine learning solutions. It's a much more tactical conversation that we get to have now, which is more exciting and valuable, I think, from our end. That said, that doesn't mean that they're always ready for the solutions. So once we get to that tactical part of the conversation, we see a broad range of maturity in the facilities and energy management teams that we chat with. And I'll talk much more about kind of that maturity landscape and what that means for us. But you see here a few statistics that I thought were really important from that same Omdia study. So you see that 77%, which to me sounds like actually a low number for this, of facilities teams keep data. Right now, the report doesn't really specify their superset of facilities teams here. They may be looking at a broad set of companies, including small ones and mature ones, as well as the large, for example, publicly traded ones. But this, I'm personally, would be surprised by this if not for a lot of conversations that I have where folks are really early in that maturity curve. And then you can see, the next step of that is less than half of the facilities teams are doing very much with that data, are performing even basic analyses, data analytics. So we're quite early stage, even if the concepts of AI and machine learning are beginning to permeate the mainstream and into those teams. Before I move farther, I'm going to be using terminology really loosely, and apologies for my sort of lazy vocabulary here. You're going to see slides that use this, term smart buildings, as well as kind of interchangeably digital transformation of the built environment. I recognize that there are nuances to each of those terms, but I want to give you a sense of kind of what I mean when I'm talking about that. What I mean is, in respect to the conversations that I have with our current and prospective customers, we're talking about applications of analytics, including but not limited to AI and machine learning, layered on to data collected by IoT devices and building systems. Increasingly, we talk a lot more about extraprise data in addition. So contextual data, like, for example, weather and emission factors, real-time grid mix, and things like this, for the purpose of solving some business challenge and providing value to business owners. And I'll talk more about what are some of the different use cases that we try to tackle. So I guess maybe a good place to start is, we have all of these conversations, an increasing number of conversations with different teams within large organizations. And depending on the team, whether it's the energy team or the facilities team, sometimes it's the manufacturing operations team, sometimes it's a sort of a digital think tank which has been set up within a large organization, the sort of like digital accelerating group. They sometimes come to us with what can be a wide variety of different challenges that they're looking to solve or different objectives. And if not, one of the first things we look to do in that conversation is determine what's the objective that they have. And they may have identified a very specific problem. They may be sort of in exploration investigation mode. But here you can see the sort of range that we see the most often. Obviously, cost is still a major concern. I would say that not so long ago, cost was the principal or sometimes only concern of many of these teams. And energy management, this solution that I mentioned, was originally intended as solely a utility cost reduction tool. Increasingly, we have built it out to serve this variety of purposes you see on the screen. Increasingly, we see folks obviously talking with us about sustainability objectives that are very rapidly being I would say taken more seriously within organizations. Right? There's increasingly a budget and a mandate behind these greenhouse gas reduction objectives, and that relates to the facilities and buildings team more and more, or they are at least looped in to the initiatives and the objectives. Obviously, resiliency, particularly in regions that have faced recent weather-related events that had an influence on their ability to operate as a business. Security, comfort, which I know we've talked about in the last few talks. Productivity is a really interesting sort of new theme that's emerging, and employee retention. Particularly in certain industries where talent retention and productivity has become an enormous business pressure very rapidly. They see potentially buildings as playing a role in both providing an environment in which employees can thrive and be happy, and will attract new employees and retain existing talent. Some of the reasons I mentioned that these conversations are accelerating, right? Which is exciting for me personally. I get to talk with more and more folks at a broader range of companies in different industries about a broader range of different use cases, like I mentioned in the last slide. So why are things accelerating? This is not a data-driven slide. This is my hypotheses, my personal experience seems to indicate that there's a broad range of different accelerants, reasons why facility managers, building managers, directors and vice presidents of operations and facilities and real estate are looking to learn more about machine learning and digital transformation. One of the big reasons is they're inundated with data. In some cases, they're inundated with data. In other cases, in nearly all cases, there's also data gaps, which we can talk about as well. But there are existing patchworks of investments in things like building management systems, smart meters, increasingly paper utility bills are being digitized and tracked. there is a pervasive sense that value is not being created out of this data that is available to them, that they are paying for hosting costs with Amazon or Microsoft or Google. They're storing the data. Potentially, they're working with large companies like Accenture or Cloudera to unify some of this data to pull it up into the cloud, but they're not actually implementing use cases which are driving visible value on the ground. So this is maybe the number one driver that we see. A second one I mentioned is greater familiarity with the terminology of AI ML, the potential types of use cases that are applicable. That could be, through any number of sources, including like the media. Sustainability is a massive accelerant. Sustainability teams are now reporting into the CFO and the COO of large companies, as opposed to the chief marketing officer, which was the case not so long ago. Part of this is because financial institutions are now putting real pressure on public organizations to achieve ESG objectives, which include Scope 1, Scope 2 emissions, which directly relate to the efficiency of the buildings of an organization. And so suddenly there is greater resources and greater pressure on these facility teams to play a key role in achieving sustainability goals. On-site power and storage, so distributed energy resources is a major new accelerant for this, is having these resources available and wanting to justify the investments for those resources. And then some other things, more kind of outside in, regulatory pressures, obviously around, in environmental metrics, rate structures. There's more opportunity for sophisticated facilities teams to save money or optimize their utility bills by participating in a variety of different sorts of programs. They're looking for tools which will help them to cater their sort of both participate in those programs as well as continue their business objectives, not see any sort of detrimental impact on their core operations, while allowing them to do things like time of use rates and demand response or other sort of load shedding programs. So that's a list of what are the reasons why we're having more of these conversations, why more folks are reaching out to us to talk about digital transformation in the built environment. I'll chat a little bit more in particular about this one, familiarity with AI use cases and what specifically folks are interested in hearing about right now. And when I say folks, I'm talking mostly about facilities teams, energy teams, buildings teams at the manager, director, and VP level, particularly in the industries of consumer packaged goods, manufacturing, food and beverage, retail, real estate, a little bit of telecommunications and financial services and technology. One of the things that's been cool for me, and I mentioned earlier that folks are coming to us more with their own ideas, there's a greater sense that digital transformation can touch many aspects of the built environment, right? I think, and I have my own hypotheses for why this is. I think it's many of the facility managers I talk to now have a Nest thermostat in their homes. They're now aware of electric vehicles and sort of the challenges and opportunities around charging those vehicles in a way that they weren't even just a few years ago. Obviously part of their budgets have gone towards censoring and metering in the recent past. And so we have a broader ranging conversation than we did previously, right? That's not just, for example, on predictive maintenance on building equipment, which is oftentimes the first topic, but also touching on energy use cases, safety use cases, distributed energy resources and electric vehicle charging use cases, lighting, and a variety of others. More specifically, I would say there are two use cases that we hear about the most from the market. And it depends on the team we're chatting with. It depends on their KPIs and how they're incented within their organization. But by far, most of the conversations that C3AI is pulled into and that we have built our product to support, because we see a lot of value creation here, are around asset health, predictive maintenance, fault detection, this sort of reliability resiliency use case on building assets, which are oftentimes HVAC equipment, but can also be elevators or many others. We have a product, C3AI Reliability, which we've deployed at enormous scale in industrial applications like in oil and gas. Increasingly, the market is pulling us to bring that product into building applications. So outside of a refinery and into, say, an office space. And then a predictive energy optimization. So like Varun was telling you about HVAC set point optimization, increasingly, a first use case that we launch into with customers because the interest and the data and the value aligns to it are things like predicting demand peaks and ISO system peaks, recommending HVAC set points, orchestrating distributed energy resources behind the meter, and things like, forecasting energy consumption, so sort of high level, anomaly detection to flag things for operators as well. There are also, more and more emerging use cases which folks reach out to us about. I would say most of the teams that I interact with are a bit less mature on these, and they're more sort of in exploration mode than in investment mode. But for example, cleaning investments within buildings have spiked, obviously, in the last 18 months. The amount of, particularly organizations that are really strategizing around how to bring folks back to work and make them feel safe. And so opportunities to use analytics to guide the sort of on the ground cleaning activities, to direct folks to the right spots at the right times, cleaning resources is potentially a way to enable improved cleanliness or better performance on that dimension at a lower cost, or not a markedly higher cost than prior. Similarly, advanced ticketing, right? Building teams are looking for new ways to interact with occupants that extends beyond sort of legacy ticketing systems where they are inundated with tickets, and it's extremely inefficient to clarify tickets and triage tickets. They're looking to sort of meet their occupants halfway to hear about issues and opportunities for improvement and opportunities for better efficiency through, for example, natural language processing on message boards within the company. So they can sort of tap into an existing dialogue to better understand what's happening within the buildings and where they can tie in and create value. Similarly, around, say, parking optimization, sending folks to the right workstations or best driving collaboration, productivity in built environments that are no longer 100% occupied with full-time tenants. We get a lot of questions about, in the future world of hybrid work, how do we both do the cost saving piece of it, which touches on cleaning and parking optimization, but also, how can we group folks to maximize what they call collisions or collaborative interactions in the office. So these are sort of emerging use cases that we're beginning to hear about from, I would say, more mature teams within the market. I can't stress enough, one of the most interesting things about the discussions that I have here at C3AI are the breadth of maturities of energy and facilities teams, depending on the organization. There are some that are extremely sophisticated, have made significant investments in sensoring, in data science, understand the challenges that they face around productionizing analytics and doing the change management that's required in order to see value out of digital transformation investments. That's sort of the right-hand side column here, all the way to folks who are very large companies, public companies that have essentially no high-frequency telemetry data for their buildings. Right, they're working off of monthly utility bills, and they're just beginning to think about what will those investments look like in advanced metering infrastructure and/or building management systems. And so it totally runs the gamut. And the types of use cases that are appropriate for these teams varies by their maturity and their interest, as well as, of course, their budget and their mandate. And I would emphasize that it's really important that the market provides solutions to teams that fall into each of these buckets, right? We cannot leave those folks who are earlier in the maturity curve in the lurch, right? There are still technology advancements that are required to meet their needs, even if they're, potentially those needs are much more about, easy, low-cost data collection, unification, and modeling versus implementation of sophisticated machine learning. So for example, where we start off with, early with teams is oftentimes benchmarking across buildings to understand, better performers and lower performers in terms of their building energy efficiency, doing the analyses that are increasingly required for regulatory reasons. We talk with them a lot about, how to start to think about seeing value out of building management systems and sensoring programs, which are in the works. Then as they go on this maturity curve, we talk much more about things like forecasting, and a really common use case that we see maybe provides the most value of any of the machine learning use cases per our customers' reports is measurement and verification. So being able to validate the return on investment after implementation of a project or an energy conservation measure. They're increasingly thinking about things like HVAC control and fault detection. And then as they advance and mature, then our conversations tend to be much more about things like Varun was talking with you about, set point optimization, predictive maintenance. And then past that point, we start to talk about much more about, performance improvement, getting the accuracy up, and then moving, closer and closer towards taking a human out of the loop. The challenges across the board that organizations are facing are around, the cost of implementing this is still really significant. If you include both the sensoring and the infrastructure, the hardware, as well as the cloud hosting to do this, in the cloud, which is the way that nearly every organization does today, the logistics and sort of IT resourcing that's required to partner with the facilities team to get this done. And then also there's this challenge around estimating the return on investment. Oftentimes it's difficult for these teams to get started until they can put a dollar value on this. And it's difficult for them to put a dollar value on many of these use cases, both because perhaps of, it's challenging to do in the abstract, and also because they're sort of indirect values, things like baselining, things like benchmarking across facilities, data modeling and unification is a different value than say changing an LED light bulb, which is a clearer use case. So one of the things C3 does with these teams is to help them build that business case and that analysis that they can then use to internally champion these investments. So these are, again, many of those same challenges. Nearly every organization we go into, one of their number one challenges is data availability. So I mentioned, they're inundated with data, but it's rarely like the right data, right? Or clean enough, or tagged data, right? Oftentimes it's data around which is uncertain quality, and the systems don't talk to each other. And maybe, in certain buildings, they have excellent data. In other buildings, they have almost no data. Another thing to flag here is this trust in insights piece. This is really a challenge we face at nearly every customer is change management, is helping them to gain trust in the analytics such that they'll take actions based on the use cases that we're bringing to see value. Because ultimately digital transformation, what we find is there's no value to the customer if no one is taking action on it. That's a consistent challenge for C3 across all of our application areas. So for example, we have almost never see customers that want to automate, for example, HVAC control. It's something that I know is discussed broadly, but even at mature organizations, I almost never see an appetite for that in the near term. What they're looking for instead is to go from a state where they're receiving tons and tons of anomalous behavior alerts and notifications, and they have to do this manual triage process, to a place where they've gained additional confidence. We've refined the models and done the change management work such that they're getting higher quality notifications that require less investigation and can move more quickly to a resolution. Similarly, when we think about temperature set point recommendations, what we're moving from is a state of where a set of recommendations requires a lot of consideration and sort of thinking on the part of the building managers, to where we've essentially increased trust to the point that those recommendations are acted upon with minimal kind of time investment on the part of the facility or building manager. The end state obviously is dynamic set point control. A number of our customers are excited about this, but again, for a variety of reasons, the reality on the ground and maturity for most organizations is not there yet. I promised you I would provide some numbers. Thanks for bearing with me for all of this. This is what I've been seeing type conversation. I hope that was useful. There is an analyst firm we use quite a bit called Verdantics that defines smart building software and built environment analytics into these buckets: real estate investment management, property portfolio management, space and workplace management, maintenance management, energy and sustainability management. You'll notice these are more industry aligned than they are use case aligned. But you can start to read into maybe some of the challenges that these markets are facing. First thing I would point you towards is about $10 billion forecasted in 2026, growing from $6 to $7 billion today. Of which the largest part of that is property portfolio management. You understand why this is, organizations that manage a portfolio of buildings such that they need sort of software that will help them to oversee that. That's also what's growing fastest in the market today. Across regions, growing at similar rates. Which is interesting. You're seeing sort of steady 8%-ish annualized growth in North America and Europe and in Asia. That's because I think a lot of those pressures that I mentioned are sort of equally faced around the world right now. One really interesting set of statistics that was recently released is this significant increase in purchase intentions for this type of software just in the last year, right? And so we can, it's hard to attribute 100% to COVID, but I think, should be taken in the context of the last year that we've had. You can see that, order of 15 to 30% greater number of firms planning to make an investment decision in these different types of use cases. Asset and maintenance management, fault detection, room and workspace reservation. Some of these obviously are more sophisticated from a machine learning perspective than others. In conclusion, I want to share a little bit of kind of how we go about actually implementing a use case, and then some learnings. What you see here on this slide is a really high-level framework for how C3 goes in. We have obviously this technology I mentioned that is strong at data unification modeling and productionalization of machine learning models. So putting into production these models and monitoring performance and enabling the change management and user interface design, all these things that enable businesses to actually inject those capabilities into their operations. So we're pulled into these conversations around AI broadly. And the way that our process generally works is initially we try to identify objectives and the use cases. So oftentimes we'll start the conversation without having even identified what exactly is the problem to be solved. We apply a prioritization in order to get from a long list of potential use cases down to the right set to really dive deep into. And for that, we think about things like, is this problem tractable? The biggest one is, do we have the data available that will enable us to solve this problem and provide the sorts of insights that will be of value and sufficiently accurate such that we can do the change management piece and gain trust And so users on the ground will take actions based on them. And then, as I mentioned, we do that business case analysis. We help them understand what's the return on investment. Very quickly, we try to get into the specific requirements for the machine learning use case. It can be at what frequency they want to be receiving alerts or set point recommendations, specifically what source systems to interconnect with. Also really important that we define success. Because a conversation where a team says we're really excited about machine learning, we're really excited about digital transformation, but we haven't really figured out exactly what success means for us. Well, that's a great starting point, but that doesn't warrant an actual investment on their part. Either investment on the part of the customer or investment on the part of C3.ai as a vendor to them. That's ultimately going to be putting data science and software engineering and product management resources against that customer. And then we have a series of workshops to really dig deep into the data with the customer and what requires cleaning and where they're at and where the data lives. And then obviously there's a whole process we do around data extract, transformation, and load. This is an area where we really excel as a company, C3.ai. Implications for search. Based on the conversations that I've had, some things that I thought might be of interest or of use to this group, right? One is that trust and interpretability of machine learning is paramount. I've been involved in a number of engagements in which we deliver a really sophisticated machine learning product, and we're farther behind on the change management piece. And folks don't understand the output. They don't understand the insight. They don't know why they should believe it. And then no value is ultimately delivered to that customer. And so a crucial element of delivering value through digital transformation is to bring the user and the customer along in the journey such that they understand and believe in the outputs of the machine learning. Second, as I said, humans will remain in the loop in most cases for a while longer. This idea of sort of optimizing infrastructure is near universally exciting and near universally rejected as an initial, once the rubber meets the road and we're talking about approvals and investments and liability, I haven't seen it done. Data availability and accessibility is oftentimes the long pole in the tent for us. It's not the data science, it's the data cleaning, and the data access is critically important. And then also, a clear business case is just as important as doing the data science well. Knowing how it's going to add value, determining specifically, how it's going to sit within an organization, and what types of benefits are anticipated is just as important as determining what's the right data science framework, and then doing an excellent job at developing excellent results and seeing high performance. Thank you so much for listening to me again. I know this was sort of a non-traditional talk at an academic workshop. I'm so appreciative for the opportunity to share my experience. I hope that it was of some use. I'll thank the team that's sitting behind me, as you can see in our office today, on the product side, as well as the data scientists like Varun and others, and software engineers who obviously are the ones who help me to bring these use cases to customers and have the experience that I've shared today.
Thank you very much, Burt. I would like to think that this is not an academic subject. It's a societal subject in general. So your perspective is very much appreciated and quite illuminating. We don't have that much time for questions. We might be running a couple of minutes behind schedule, but I would like to pose one that you might find unfair, which is you correctly have focused dealing at the enterprise level, because this is where the elements of scale exist, the organizational, wherewithal and everything else. But what happens to the residential consumer? How do you think we can access those? And maybe just a couple of quick thoughts on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I've had the opportunity to work quite a bit with power utilities about how to take advantage of of digital transformation towards their objectives with respect to residential consumers, in terms of identifying which residences are, make for the best participants for demand response offering, identifying which residential consumers are likely to have solar panels or electric vehicle chargers, C3 doesn't sell into residential consumers, but from my own personal experience, I think there's enormous innovation happening on the residential side. I recently purchased my own Nest thermostat. I'm very excited about it. I think here in Silicon Valley, where I'm based, where about approximately 70% of cars on the highway are Teslas now. That's not a scientific finding. I think folks have now a new relationship to energy. Once they buy an electric vehicle, they now are forced to think about things like time of use rates and holistic, energy orchestration across different assets in the home. I would say also, sustainability is permeating the conscience of the residential consumer at the same time as now they have these remote accessible loads in their home, and the utility is engaging them in a new way and potentially targeting them by virtue of those accessible loads or their load profile. So I think that kind of there's a number of vectors that are converging around a greater engagement on the part of the residential consumer, a greater sophistication of many residential consumers, and a greater sophistication in the interaction of the residents with the broader power infrastructure. So I'm really personally excited. I know C3 is excited to see how that space evolves as well.
Thank you very much, Burt. That's quite insightful indeed, and all of us can see the change. And you reflected to that in your presentation. Also, change in the at the enterprise level certainly is reflected at the consumer level, at least in the mentality